PBE is a vibrant approach to education that takes students to the communities to learn and grow. It's local and it's connected to students in a way that they can identify with. It's either a problem in their community or an event that's happening, or it could be a geographical phenomenon. PBE emphasizes learning through participation in service projects for the local school or community. Newburyport has so many places that are great for students to learn. Maudsley is good for examining trees and plants using dichotomous keys, as well as Atkinson Common. Joppa Flats is good for students to study salt marsh. The river and the ocean give us ways to study fish and what's in the water. Schools should support PBE because it is more interesting for kids than working in a classroom. It's an easier way for them to learn, and they can interact with outdoors and nature. PBE helps us get a better understanding of things around us and what natural things are happening. It's an easier way to learn, and it's more exciting than sitting in a classroom. Some drawbacks of PBE are bad weather, could be too hot or too cold, and potential injuries, and some kids might not find the trip interesting. PBE was developed by the Orion Society.
At Maudsley State Park, we got there by bike from school, and when we got there, we did a drawing of the ground inside a circle rope. Then we wrote for 15 minutes about the scenery of Maudsley and how it looked. When we went through the woods on our bike during lunch and had a good time, just hanging with our friends. And then we used dichotomous keys to identify trees. What we learned were eastern red cedars are used in the process of making tea. And many of the plants we learned about over there were over 3 feet tall. We also learned how to use a dichotomous key, obviously, to identify the trees. And I also learned that Maudsley total is 480 acres and is home to many smaller animals. It changed our opinion of Maudsley because in a classroom you can't get as much info and detail as you can outside in the natural world.
Hi, I'm a reporter for the school. I heard you just went on a recent trip to Maudsley State Park. How was it?
It was very fun.
What did you guys do there?
We kind of learned about plants and trees and how to identify them.
Yes. Did it change your opinion of learning?
Yeah, I think it did. So I'd rather learn outside and be bored than rather be in the classroom and just really doing anything.
Thank you very much.
When my class was on the kayaking field trip, I thought that it was a fun and great way to learn. On the field trip, we kayaked down the Merrimack River, stopping at a few places to learn about the salt marsh, the wildlife, and other topics of science. On our field trip, we learned about the Merrimack River and how it was once one of the dirtiest rivers in the United States. It used to be a different color every day because of a factory in New Hampshire that produced dyes from dyeing clothes. This you probably wouldn't learn in a classroom. We also learned that the salt marshes along the Merrimack River are very important because a lot of our seafood that we eat comes from the salt marshes along the Merrimack River. It changed our opinion or thoughts about learning because the field trip made learning fun. Also, it was easier for us to get information because we were outdoors interacting with nature.
Hello. I'm an interviewer for the school, and I heard you just recently went on a kayaking trip. How was it?
It was really good.
Yeah, so what did you learn on the trip?
Well, I learned on the kayaking trip was the different types of salt marshes.
Nice. Was it a lot better than learning in a class?
Yes, it was definitely better than learning in class.
Yes, I'm sure it was. Thank you.
When our class went to Joppa Flats, we did lots of things there. We measured salinity in different levels of water. We measured the height of different marsh plants. We measured the volume of mummy chogs and green crabs. We got there by bike for staying green. We also learned lots of things. We learned how to use a refractometer, how much salinity is in the water in different parts. We learned the sizes of all the different types of plants. We learned the volumes of the fish and crabs. We learned about invasive species called Phragmites, and learned how to use a graduated cylinder. It changed our opinion of learning outside because learning outdoors has more natural resources than inside a classroom.
Hey man, what's up? Good to see you. Excuse me, sir. I'd like to ask you 3 questions about the trip you recently went on, the job flash. So what do you think about it? I thought it was pretty interesting. All the stations I went to were pretty... Everything made me learn a lot of stuff. Well, give me a few examples of what you learned. I learned that the salinity in the marsh is a lot higher and denser near the water. Alright, so do you think this changed your opinions about learning? Like, do you think it was easier than learning in a classroom? Yeah, it was a lot easier because I got to interact with nature, and I got to it was just a lot better than sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day. Alright, thank you very much. Bye. At Sandy Point, we split up into groups and were assigned to a station. The first station was working with the barnacles. We'd measure the height of the highest barnacle on the rock. Then we'd count the number of barnacles in the highest populated area. The second and third stations were measuring the numbers of different species using a quadrat. After this, we had free time to roam around the tide pools. Then we split back into the same groups and went to stations where we learned about the tide pool species, the shorebirds, and the dune ecology. After the scorching hot day of work, we finally got to swim in the ocean. What we learned at Sandy Point in the tide pools was that green and Asian shore crabs are invasive species, and rock crab is native. Green crabs have 5 notches on both sides from their claws to their eyes. If a crab's abdomen is wide and rounded, then it's a female. But if its abdomen is narrow, then it's a male. A horseshoe crab uses its tail to flip itself over if it's upside down. For the glacial history, we learned that 15,000 to 20,000 years ago was the Wisconsin Ice Age. 10,000 years ago, the ice started to melt and drumlins were formed. Glaciers traveled from north to south and were a mile thick. They traveled from Canada to New England. Plum Island is one big sandbar. We learned about the gulls is that there are 21 species of gulls and 7 live in New England. Gulls sleep in the ocean, which cools them off. If babies are hungry, they will peck at the orange dot on the mother's beak, which makes her regurgitate. Gulls patrol the shorelines in the ocean, and they pick up scraps. Sandpipers migrate 4,000 to 10,000 miles each year. They double their weight after their summer feeding season. They poke sand for insects, and they also have long legs to run. All this changed my thoughts about learning because I was able to learn more and get more information when I was in the biome than I would sitting in a classroom. Hello, sir. My name is Derek Walsh, and I am a news reporter for the school. I'd like to ask you about a trip you recently went on, a Sandy Point trip. What do you think about it?
Well, I thought the Sandy Point trip was really fun. We learned a lot of things about the habitat there, and we learned about density and also about Phragmites, which is an invasive species. And I thought that it was really fun.
Well, do you think it was a lot better than learning in a classroom?
Well, I think that it is because, it's place-based education. We get to go outside and study where we live. So yeah, it's definitely better than learning in a classroom.
All right, thank you very much.
Teachers!
PBE. Place-based education is learning that is rooted in what's local to the unique history, environment, culture, economy, literature, and art of a particular place.
Invasive. A species that is not native to an area. The species has a tendency to take over because it has no natural predators or competitors in that area.
Quadrat. Each of a small areas of habitat, typically of 1 square meter, selected at random to act as samples for assessing the local distribution of plants or animals.
Salinity. Saltiness or salt content in water.
Refractometer. An instrument for measuring a refractive index.
Concepts! We hope you learned.
What PBE is, how PBE is beneficial to students.
Newburyport is an ideal place for PBE.
PBE is the the way to be. You go kayaking out at sea.
You examine trees with the dichotomous key. You use a refractometer to measure salinity.
PBE, it's the way to be. So what if you get stung by a bee?